Okay, I think we'll get going here. This is the second panel on broadband service adoption. It doesn't do any good to have a broadband network available if people don't use it. It doesn't do any good to people who would like to use it if they don't know how to use it or if they can't afford it. And it doesn't do any good to people who don't know they need it until they get appropriate education. This distinguished panel is going to discuss all of these topics of broadband adoption. We have with us Thomas Kamber, the Executive Director of the Older Adults Technology Services here in New York City. Phillip Jones, the Commissioner from the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission, who has a very unusual and I think potential best practice in terms of how to fund these services. Luke Swarthout, from the Director of Adult Education Services from the New York Public Library, and Lou Zacharilla, the co-founder of the Intelligent Community Forum. Mr. Kamber, you have the floor.
There you go. There you go. I got the floor, but no microphone. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Sayre, for having us and for the very educational panels that I was able to observe from earlier. It's always fun to come here and learn something new from the sort of nonprofit perspective and see all of the regulatory framework and discussions that go on. I'm the Executive Director of Older Adults Technology Services, which is a nonprofit based here in New York City. We are in our 13th year of operation and currently operate 24 technology labs here in the city, with the primary site being the Senior Planet Exploration Center, which is the country's only technology-themed community center for older adults that is located here in Chelsea on 25th Street between 6th and 7th Avenues. We're, I think, one of the sort of nonprofit success stories in terms of focusing on broadband adoption, and our attention has been focused on the needs of older adults, people over the age of 60, who continue to this day to be late adopters on new technologies, including broadband adoption and services from home. We started out 12 years ago with simple community partnerships, providing technology training in housing developments and senior centers, finding labs in community sites that were empty and needed curriculum and trainers and funding. And at the time, only 26% of older adults over the age of 65 had ever used the internet. And fast forwarding today, we're still lagging, although we finally crossed 50%, we're still not over 75% at the utilization rates. And for broadband adoption at home, the numbers are still down in the 30s. And as each new technology comes available, seniors tend to lag the general population in terms of adoption. So many years ago, there was a lot of hand-wringing when ATMs and call waiting systems and bank scanner machines came online, and people noticed that older people were less willing to adopt those technologies at the same rates as the younger population. And there were all sorts of marketing studies done about how to get seniors to adopt those technologies. When the internet and email and social networking programs came online, it became a much more urgent challenge. And today, certainly with broadband adoption at home and all of the channels in terms of social engagement and health, the population over the age of 60 really needs to be taking advantage of these technologies, but continues to be lagging in terms of the numbers. There's some data that was shared as part of the briefing materials for the conference today that showed seniors, people over the age of 60, tailing off rather aggressively in terms of the numbers that are taking advantage. So it seems to be something that's an ongoing challenge with each generation of emerging technologies. Our analysis is that seniors can and will learn all of the mainstream technologies that the younger population uses, and what we've done is taught the standard things that are popular out there: Gmail, PCs, tablets, iPads, Facebook, all of the standard programs that people learn. And what we found is that if you give people a slower, more supportive environment to learn them in the first place, people do come and take advantage of those programs. So last year we had 13,000 visitors at the Exploration Center. People are literally lining up down the sidewalk when we open up new class enrollment. So we've had to adjust our class enrollment programs because we can't have them camping out like it's Rolling Stones tickets. So we're having pairing people up more for the classes. But we have a website, seniorplanet.org, which is sort of a lifestyle and technology content site that gets about 135,000 unique visitors per month. And we find an intense amount of interest in taking courses and being engaged. But what we have noted is that older people have somewhat different perspectives and different kind of content needs than the younger population when they learn. So we find that many people have gone to community colleges or broad-based library classes and wanted to take a class and have come to us and said, I kind of want a course that's more senior focused, that follows a little bit the pacing that older people like to use when they learn new technologies, that's relevant to some of the content issues around health and travel and connecting with family and making memoirs and things like that that older people are really engaged in. And also where they can share with other seniors, because one of the overlapping dynamics that's been occurring in the last 20 years is that not only are we having a technology revolution, but we're having a longevity revolution that's simultaneously taking place. So as we're adding more and more years to the human lifespan, when I go to conferences about aging, they talk about technology in the context of how are we reinventing this last 20 or 30 years of life now that so many people are having as we're healthier and more engaged and we're staying in the workforce longer. People are returning to the higher education systems to get new trainings and new educational opportunities. People are traveling and starting all sorts of projects where they're giving back and becoming contributing members of different kinds of communities. And technology is a linchpin to defining what some of those processes and characteristics look like. So what we've been really excited about at O.A.T.S has been providing not just training, but engaging people with these outcomes. And so for example, we have a digital entrepreneurship institute that's funded privately by the Consumer Electronics Foundation, where older adults are coming in and starting businesses using technology, where they're getting websites or Etsy accounts or learning how to do online freelancing as writers and different project-based work. We have job searching classes. We've got people writing novels and doing health and wellness activities. We've got a social action group that's working on city policy around transportation and had a commissioner in recently discussing how to make the city more age-friendly. And all of these activities come out of people's initial engagement with becoming participants in the digital age, but when they do it in the context of an identifiable user group, they can make a lot more out of it. So one of our lessons really is that on the broadband adoption side, first of all, older adults are a high priority in terms of needing the support and investment. We think there's still at least 20 million people over the age of 60 out there who would be online if we could give them the kinds of support that we're able to give here in New York City. Secondly, that they can and will learn mainstream technologies and apply them and deploy them in really successful ways around aging issues. Thirdly, it really requires a public-private partnership to get these projects working. So we've had funding from the city government and all sorts of different levels, whether it's city council members giving us discretionary grants up to the city government now that gives us ongoing funding for our centers in Manhattan and other parts of the city that we operate. We have support from the telecommunications industry, and many of them are on our boards. Comcast and Time Warner Cable and AT&T and Sony and Google are all really active, as well as the Australian investment bank, the Macquarie Group, which has really been engaged in supporting a lot of our work. And then finally, we've been able to get philanthropic funders in as well and create that mixture. So in order to make these programs work in the long run, it does require these different kinds of engagements where you've got the combination of public and private and nonprofit participation. And then finally, the last part is that we are very actively working with David Solway's Office of Broadband program here in New York State, where the next stage, now that we have a very robust program in New York City that's serving tens of thousands of people a year, we are working in upstate New York in the North Country region, where we're starting 7 new centers. We just opened a new location in the Champlain Mall up in Plattsburgh, where we're finding lots and lots of seniors that are walking the mall every day and looking for something to engage with, where a broadband adoption program can help them learn how to use the internet and take advantage of a lot of the telecommunications infrastructure that's being built in terms of fiber investment in those that region of the state. So we can sort of piggyback on some of the public investments that are going on, as well as the private ones. And I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Next on our panel is Commissioner Phillip Jones from the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. Phil, take it away.
Thank you, Gregg, and thanks for putting together this good panel. Most of the efforts in my state, I come from the state of Washington, which is on the other coast, in the northwest part of our country. We are really a state of 2 states. We have the west side of the state, the Puget Sound area. You're probably familiar with the Seattle area. Gregg, I think it's growing faster than New York City right now. It is really rapidly growing with Amazon, Boeing, Microsoft. A lot of the tech companies are leading that. So that's kind of an urban, densely populated area. For broadband deployment, obviously, it's easier to deploy to those areas, and frankly, a lot of the adoption activities are pretty active there. The eastern part of our state is less populated, more conservative, high cost to serve, and quite rural. So some people call this a tale of 2 states, but we have to think about this as state agency officials when we try to accomplish an objective. When I look at broadband adoption in this era of a lot of litigation around the proper classification of what is a broadband internet access service, what is telecommunication service, it's really important to step away from those issues from time to time as a state agency official, I believe, and focus on this adoption issue. It's not easy for us to do because primarily we're a regulator, and some companies are skeptical, and as you heard from the industry representative before, don't appreciate too much regulation when other companies are not regulated at all. But there are certain programs that we do that I'd like to mention to you that I think could help. And then I'd like to talk about a few more innovative ways, like Thomas was talking about, partnering with NGOs and nonprofits. So first of all, we have an ability to designate at the State Commission an eligible telecommunications carrier. It's called an ETC, as you know. So the ETC designation process is important because it allows us to examine what a telecommunications carrier can do. And when we look at ETC designations, we're looking at financial fitness, we're looking at their capabilities, and also we look at low income, underserved areas, how this carrier can meet those obligations. So the ETC designation process is quite important. And of course, we do that in concert with the FCC. Another way of getting at this is a state USF fund, what is called a Universal Service Fund. So I think over 20 states or 30 states, I don't know if Sherry's in the audience from NRI, I think it's, no, okay. I think we have about 25 or 30 states that have this. My state has it. Most of these state funds are funded on a fee on an access line. In my state, we reformed the fund a couple of years ago. It comes out of the general fund of the state government. It's not a big one for us. It's about $5 million, up to $5 million a year. And the larger carriers cannot participate in our fund. We've targeted that fund to the smaller rural carriers. And as I said, we're kind of a state of 2 states, so most of that money goes to the eastern part of our state. The other way where we can have an impact, I think, is working with the FCC on this new program that they've offered, Broadband Lifeline. So traditionally, as you know, Lifeline has been primarily oriented toward voice, but now the FCC is teeing it up to go to broadband. So this is a discount of $9.25 a month. It gets at the affordability issue I'll talk about in a minute. So that can be a help. Now, the FCC has teed up a lot of issues in this proposed rulemaking, and one of them, I think, is what the states can do in addition to what the FCC is doing with this $9.25, up to $9.25 discount. So that's an interesting one. A lot of states are strapped for funds. I don't see a lot of states right now stepping forward without further prodding of bringing millions of dollars into a state broadband fund. California and other states are quite active here, but you know, this is a possibility. If the FCC comes up with a streamlined and innovative program of both eligibility and, say, states step up to the table, we can really leverage this money and do more. I think there's some possibilities there, but it's not going to be easy. So what are the problems that I see with greater broadband adoption in my state? The first, and I think Thomas talked about this, is whether it's a senior citizen or not a senior citizen. It's this lack of relevance. What does it mean to me? And just basic digital literacy skills. And this has been well documented in Pew reports and in other reports. And I'm not going to dwell on that, but I would just affirm that in my state, when I get involved in these activities, that question of relevance and digital literacy comes up a lot. Also, the issue of affordability. For many people, and that relates to relevance, right? Because consumers want to pay for something that's relevant. They don't want to pay for something that's not relevant in their view. So in my state, we have three traditional carriers that offer the discounted service. One is Comcast, the Internet Essentials program. Some of you are familiar with that. It's basically $9.99 a month. It has reached in the Seattle area about 29% of the eligible population. Washington State as a whole is number 8 in the country. So Comcast has been doing a pretty good job of getting its Internet Essential program out there, but I know there are frustrations that they have. I've talked with Comcast, even though we don't regulate them directly. They have difficulties with school superintendents, school districts, and other areas as they try to get broadband further out. CenturyLink is in my state. They have a program at $9.99 a month. For first year, $14.99. You have to sign up for a 2-year commitment, plus they provide the modem. Frontier is another big carrier in my state. They offer no discount. So it's $19.99 a month. For standalone DSL, you have to buy telephone service. So those are the kind of the basic offerings on affordability of the 3 major wireline carriers in my state. Now, we also have wireless carriers, AT&T, Sprint, all the major. T-Mobile is headquartered in my state. They all offer lifeline programs. But frankly, they haven't been very successful in reaching that lifeline, that low-income or the hard-to-reach population. The prepaid lifeline carriers have been much better. But of course, those are mainly voice services, but with this new proposal from the FCC, I could easily see those carriers also wanting to get into the broadband or more into the broadband business. Another important factor, a barrier to adoption in my state is languages. We have some of the carriers do a better job than others in having multilingual staff. We have a lot of Asian Americans. We have a lot of immigrants who come in from all over the world, some, especially the senior citizens. You know, they can't speak English. So you need people at the carriers who can offer that multilingual approach. I'm sorry that Commissioner Rosenworcel isn't here today. She is fond of talking about the homework gap. That's another issue where I agree with Jessica in that some of these populations, even if they can have a fixed broadband connection at a school or a library, if they're not able to go home and have a fixed broadband connection at home when they do their homework, that's not a good thing. But again, some of these populations live in hard-to-serve areas, and the carriers do not have sufficient fiber and capacity out there. The last thing I'm going to say is the commissions. I think what I do, rather than quote, regulate sometimes. I think some of the best things that we can do is be a facilitator. So what does that mean? Facilitator means that we convene people just like we do here at NARUC and the 706 committee. We convene stakeholders together, we define the agenda, we bring people together to try to define the problem and come up with common solutions. I must confess, I've been at this for about 7-8 years, and in some years I'm able to do this better than others. We're very busy. We're stretched in many different directions. We regulate electricity, natural gas. Big issue in my state now is oil transport, so we're busy on the transport side. So just finding the time and the staff resources to pull something like that together is challenging, but I think we need to step up to the plate. There are a lot of stakeholders here. You have groups like my colleagues at the table. In state governments, you have the Office of the CIO, you have the Economic Development Director. Certain cities like New York and Seattle are quite active, so you have to involve the city officials, you have to involve the governor's office. But anyway, my point is, and the state librarian and the state superintendent of public education and the schools are obviously really important. But I think we need to do more here. So I think we need to do more as a facilitator, convening all the groups and bring them together around a discussion, frankly, like this one. Thank you, Gregg.
Next up is Luke Swarthout. New York City is doing, as you've already heard, some amazing things with broadband, and he will give the perspective of what the New York Public Library is doing here.
Thank you very much, Gregg. Thank you to the commissioners, all of you for coming here. My name is Luke Swarthout. I'm the Director of Adult Education Services at the New York Public Library. We serve about 4 million New Yorkers in the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island, and partner with our colleagues in the Brooklyn Public Library and the Queens Public Library to serve this great city. I should comment, it's a testament to the commitment to showing the power of technology that this meeting has decided to place you so far from us. So, you know, we're living a real commitment to in this case, just voice, but soon we'll be able to get data from this to you, provider willing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our pilot project we launched to lend 10,000 Wi-Fi hotspots with a year of data service to low-income families across New York City. I want to walk through how we came to the project, what we're doing, and how it's going. The how we came to it is going to cover some ground that, that Commissioner Jones just spoke about and that you're all familiar with. But I think one value I might be able to offer you is a sort of look inside how a public library, at least just one, thinks about this broadband adoption issue, how we came to it, because I think it's not so dissimilar from some libraries you may be working with. So we start from the same place everybody else does, which is about 27% of New York City residents don't have home internet access. It's roughly the same population across the country. Now, it's not a random 27%, right? We know disproportionately low-income New Yorkers are more likely to be without home internet access. And that means some of the folks who could most benefit from home internet are left in the digital dark. So what are the reasons we're concerned about home broadband adoption at the public library? So the first one is the homework gap. Commissioner Rosenworcel talks about all the time how 7 in 10 students already have homework assignments that have an internet component, yet many lack the ability to get online. A second is just the obvious employment opportunities that are necessary, require home internet access, or internet access, whether that's just applying for a job or sort of doing much of the work that's required at many of our Fortune 500 companies. And then the third is the reality that, again, Commissioner Jones pointed out, that our libraries and schools, for all the amazing work they do helping people get online, are closed too many of the hours when people need to get online. So what are the main barriers to broadband adoption? Again, this is where we look at it: relevance, skills, and cost. And libraries have historically played a role in the first two, right? We present people the opportunity, just as Tom's organization does, to become acquainted with the internet, to see its value in their day-to-day lives. We provide skills training. I know New York Public Library has made a renewed commitment to helping everybody from the sort of most novice internet or computer user to more advanced individuals trying to upgrade their skills by doubling our tech training offerings in the last couple of years. So libraries are not new to broadband adoption. We've just pursued some very specific strategies. I think what's new for us is a desire to try and address the question of cost. And the reason we did this, frankly, like many things, starts with some anecdotes. It is a fairly commonplace occurrence that if you go in evenings after the library is closed, you can find children, adults of all kinds in libraries across our 3 boroughs sitting outside catching the Wi-Fi bleed. I mean, it's so common that some of this way may resonate with some folks. We had the experience of a New York Times reporter wanting to do a story about this. And he just went to a lot. You're always a little worried when you give an anecdote and you then send a reporter that they'll go there and then no one will have the problem and they'll come back and they'll say, you're making it up. He went to a library, and sure enough, the library closes and there's a middle schooler sitting on the steps of the library trying to do his math homework, right? Catching our Wi-Fi bleed. And our president, Tony Marks, about 1.5 years ago, challenged the staff to say, what more can we do, right? How can we go beyond our traditional role as a community anchor institution and tackle cost? So we looked at a couple of different options. The first one we considered was just, what if we amped up the Wi-Fi bleed, right, and just pushed it out into communities? To be honest, we were really concerned about helping folks with meaningful use inside their homes, and the technology just doesn't necessarily penetrate through some of the big brick walls we have in this city. Additionally, the city has a much better, more advanced strategy around pursuing the question of public Wi-Fi through the project that Brittany spoke about. A second option that I know some libraries in Delaware and other places are pursuing is looking about using white space to rebroadcast the connectivity that libraries have. But if you've, in your way into this building, you may have noticed there are some logistical challenges with that particular endeavor in New York City, given the sort of physical realities of our city. And so what we settled on was a project where we purchased Wi-Fi hotspots. So we're now using 4G Netgear Zings, which are like the size of an iPhone 6, to lend out up to a year of free internet service to families around New York City. So a couple reasons we settled on this. From our perspective, low capital costs, easy to lend. Again, we were trying to get inside people's homes, and the technology allows for meaningful use in a living room or in a bedroom when you're trying to do homework after school. We had some better ability to target to the priority families we really wanted to be able to help, and the technology is scalable, although to a point within existing networks. Last spring, we launched a 10,000, okay, so let me pause for a second. So that's how we came to it, right? We've done adoption before. We're deeply committed to helping the families of New York City, all families, be able to engage in and succeed educationally and economically. And unfortunately, for too many, barriers to accessing home internet is preventing that and undermining, frankly, our efforts to spread the great wealth of information we have. So then how do we do it? Well, last spring, we settled on a pilot to lend 100 of these Wi-Fi hotspots. We partnered with a Mobile Beacon, which is an EBS holder, to lend these to students and families in some of our after-school programs and some of our adult literacy classes, so basically programs for immigrants. They're lending period was 2 months, renewable for another 2 months. And really what we were trying to see is, was there meaningful use? So did people use the devices in hours when libraries were closed? So yes, about 3 hours on average per night, mostly between 6 p.m. and midnight. Were they using it for uses that, that helped advance, again, their academic and economic opportunities? Yes, so self-reported data, but we saw kids doing homework or using educational software we provided them through the library. We saw adults looking for information about jobs. And we also saw the types of activities, communications, entertainment, news, that constitute meaningful use and frankly are why we all likely have internet in our homes. The pilot was successful enough that we launched last fall. One more, perfect, hooray. Our library hotspot project, again, spreading out and using the Brooklyn and Queens public libraries to lend 10,000 devices to targeting low-income families. We put out an RFP last summer. Sprint was the low-cost bidder, and we agreed to purchase 10,000 Netgear Zings, as I mentioned. Sprint's partnering with Mobile Beacon, which helped bring down the cost. And on average, we're paying about $13 a month for service, and on average about $30 for the device, using a mixture of new and refurb devices. Service is probably about 6 megabytes per second down, 4 up, although obviously varies based on your location within New York City. But anecdotally, we've had pretty good responses. It's unthrottled until about 6 gigs of usage over the course of a month. So Sprint's agreement through ConnectEd is about 3. We managed to work with them to have it to be unthrottled till 6 gigs, and after that it throttles down considerably until the end of the month, but remains. But there is no cap. We were trying to the best of our ability to help people have the experience of real meaningful home internet access, not something where they felt like there were arbitrary thresholds or it shut off two weeks into the service. One of the advantages of working with a couple of different library services is the ability to create some natural differentiation of the program. Our goal here is to create a model or to try and take lessons that can be broadened and applied to other library services, and knowing that it just works in our organization was not as powerful as knowing that it worked in others as well. So at every place you have to have a library card. It has to be fine-free. We ask everybody to say if they have internet and urge them not to borrow, and in fact our contract says that they don't have home internet access. Obviously, how reliably people are answering that remains to be seen, and part of our evaluation after this project is to see how successfully we've been able to target to people who don't have service. New York Public is lending for 6 months, renewable up to a year. Brooklyn Public Library is lending for a year, and Queens is lending for a month, renewable for 3 additional months. The hope is that it's a long enough time period that somebody who doesn't have a device finds a reason to acquire one, either by purchasing a low-cost desktop or tablet or acquiring one from a family member. The program costs about $2 million. We received funding from a number of generous supporters, and while some of those sponsors are New York specific, we know in talking to St. Paul and Seattle and Kansas City and other cities around the country that are doing something similar, that there are local philanthropic charities, elected officials, local corporations that have expressed interest or extended resources to support the program. For us, the key questions when we think about this are a combination of speed, number of devices, and the length of time, and that in there, you wind up with a balance between cost and impact. And again, we made a decision to go with a slightly longer time frame because we're hoping at the end of this, we've changed some individuals' calculus about the value of home internet, even if we're not able to continue to provide it to people for free. We're about 7 months into the project. We've lent about 5,000 devices using targeting high-need neighborhoods where we know broadband penetration is lowest and broadband adoption lags behind the rest of the city. Anecdotally, again, positive responses, although when you give somebody free internet, you expect a positive response. So, I will refrain from hands up for who wants free internet, right? We'll just assume we're all enthusiastic. We are in the process of trying to enlist serious scholar in this field to conduct an evaluation and thinking about how we can measure medium and longer term impact of take-up rates, and then thinking about what place a program like this might have in the toolbox of broadband adoption efforts that a city like New York City or really any community might have. But it's certainly been positive for us, and again, it's been a positive process for the New York Public Library to think about how it can tackle this broadband adoption challenge in a new way. Thank you. Sorry.
And last on the panel is Lou Zacharilla, the co-founder of Intelligent Community Forum. Lou, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Gregg, and thank you, Commissioner Sandoval, for having me here today. I came down quite a distance. I'm up on 68th Street, so probably got here later than most of you, though, with our transportation system today, but it's okay. I'm actually going to tell you a little bit about our work. I'm going to take it up a couple of feet from the discussion here. We are a think tank based here in New York. Our mission is very simple. We want to build a community for the 21st century. Any place that somebody calls home is of interest to us. We want to re-energize it using the tools and understanding the relationship between broadband, economic development, and human purpose. So we call ourselves Intelligent Community Forum, and I'll explain why. That Chinese there, if anybody reads Chinese, actually means wisdom. I actually just gave a presentation to the Chinese Ministry of Information Technology this morning here in New York. And they don't call it intelligent, they call it wisdom, because they want communities built on wisdom. She's shaking her head, so you can tell me later. Okay. Next slide. I told you I was going to take you up a few feet. This is going to be 23,000 miles. I come from the satellite industry. I was an entrepreneur. I started a couple of businesses in the satellite communications industry, which was why I actually got involved with this work. It was a very personal endeavor. I actually grew up in upstate New York, and I grew up in a very small town that actually fell apart. Like a lot of you have stories about communities falling apart. Mine did, and I always wondered why. So as I got involved with the satellite industry, I began to understand very quickly, because we had a chance to meet Arthur C. Clarke and a lot of other people, that you can put 3 satellites in geosynchronous orbit and they can cover the Earth with the broadband footprint. So we started to ask really smart people, the founders of BlackBerry, who were friends of ours, a gentleman named Mayor Ma in Taiwan, who's now the president. We started to ask him if there was a relationship between this broadband stuff and economic and social development. And we concluded that there was, and it's very significant. The best example, the best way to start this is to give you a geography lesson. This is obviously the Korea Peninsula at night. I put North and South Korea there just for my college audiences in America, because when I used to ask them, they always said, "This is Florida." This is Korea. So I didn't want to insult anybody here. But it's really interesting, because we have 3 intelligent communities that we've designated in South Korea. But if you do a flyby, which happened last night as we took our satellites over the Korean Peninsula, what you saw was very striking. Obviously in the south, the great cities of Seoul and Suwon and Busan, the Gangnam-gu, they are what? They're just lit. And this represents communities, a nation of free people choosing their own destiny, adhering to their own culture. They are very much Koreans in South Korea, but positioning themselves for the 21st century to be successful. They are moving toward the light. They have made a very, very specific decision to do that. Obviously, 20 miles north of the 38th parallel, what do you see? Absolute darkness. You see a culture moving toward or plunged in darkness. And people always ask me, what is that little white light there in North Korea to the left? And I always tell them that's a Mets fan looking for the World Series. I'm a Yankees fan. But I like the Mets. It's obviously it's the capital city, and they can barely light their streets. I use this as an example when we talk about broadband adoption because the Koreans, South Koreans, obviously no longer even have the discussions we are having here this morning, or that we had here earlier today. They don't talk about whether you should have broadband. They don't even talk about what we talk about more and more, who pays for it. They say it is like electricity. I have lights in my room when I flip on the switch. I don't want to talk about how the lights get there or who pays for the electricity. I want to talk about what you do when those lights are on, how you move our civilization forward toward the light economically and socially. And that's why you see a nation, largely driven by the South Koreans, which in 1974 was the 8th poorest nation on earth, and today is the 7th most prosperous. That's the largest economic migration in human history for a nation. Press that, Aaron. I think there's a reason for that, and I think it applies to cities. This is what's actually going on in cities around the world that we study. Now, our job is to study cities and to try to understand why they work well and to share that information with anybody who wants it. What is really going on in places that you preside over and have mandate over, and maybe a city councilor in, is that there are decisions being made to move either toward the light, economic growth, the creation of new industries, or to remain plunged in darkness by having discussions such as, gee, can we get the incumbent to put in high-speed broadband? Should we connect our schools? What's the role of our library? It is a really, really high-stakes game because our view is that we are undergoing something like a new renaissance, and it's being done the way the original renaissance was done, city by city by city. When you think of the history of Europe, it happened in Italy, but it was done city by city by city where the arts, the technology, the business people, and the governments of the era mashed up. They would come together to talk about progress. And what evolved was 400 years of Western dominance in areas like technology, in areas like knowledge, in areas like learning. The actual same process is going on today, in our view, because we go globally, in the cities that we see. And so if you read our books, Brain Gain, Seize Our Destiny are two of the titles, you will get case studies of how this new renaissance is emerging. So just put that image in your head about light and dark when you start talking about your cities. Aaron? For the first time in human history, so far as we know, and this is significant to adoption, two conditions exist that never existed before. One is that a human being can live anywhere he or she wants. They could go back to my hometown, possibly, and live. The second condition is that they can be part of a global economy. Those two conditions never existed side by side before. This is really a first for our species, which is really fascinating to us, and it's, again, one of the reasons I got involved with this. However, what's necessary is that you have the connection, and that connection is broadband, right? So, you know, I come from a railroad town. You know, my grandfather was a foreman on the railroad. He came over from Italy, raised 11 kids because that infrastructure of the time, the railroad was there and available to him. And he could raise 11 children on a lower middle class wage, live in a community, contribute social capital to his church, put his kids through school, let them fight in World War II, let them start businesses, and all of this economic activity flourished as a result of that infrastructure. What we're talking about now, as we eliminate the middle of nowhere, I always say the middle of nowhere is no more, is the construction of a new railroad. So again, let's not have a discussion about technology, because technology scares people. You know, maybe not the people in this room, but 50% of the people that we talk to are scared of technology. So I try not to talk about that. What we talk about is the new railroad. What's the proposition? Well, the proposition of the old railroad was that if it ran through your town, you could put stuff on it. It happened to be timber, it happened to be natural resources, could be peppermint, as it was in upstate New York. New York State exported 90% of the world's peppermint, largely by rail, in the 1840s. You could trade, you could do business, you could conduct economic activity. Broadband's the same thing, so don't get confused by technology. I mean, I can talk technology till you really all fall down in your chairs asleep. But the proposition is the same, except the railroad goes everywhere. And the cargo, the new cargo, are ideas. They are applications. They are the ability to collaborate. We have communities that we've designated intelligent communities through our awards process, which I encourage you to look at, that are collaborating cross-border. We've got Eindhoven in Holland collaborating with Waterloo, Ontario, collaborating with Taipei to trade new nanotechnology ideas and R&D that will evolve into new industries. So that's what's possible today on the new railroad, and I emphasize new industries because of this. If you read the new book, The Rise of Robots, which I would encourage you to read, there's a claim in there that 50% of the workforce in the next 25 years will be just eviscerated. The repetitive work will be done by robots. Most of us do repetitive work. What is important is not that we create jobs, because for every job you create, you're going to lose 3 in your community, your economy. What's important is that you use the new railroad to create adoption processes, collaboration, that will lead to new industries. And that's a real critical point now, because we can't create one job at a time. We're going to have to create 40, 50,000 jobs at a time, and that's what we look for when we study these communities. So when you go to a place like Columbus, Ohio, which was our Intelligent Community of the Year, you'll see that they created 29,000 jobs over the last 18 months using their broadband infrastructure, connecting it, making it a universal architecture. Kingston, Ontario, Stratford, Canada. These are robust economies that are now creating industries. Waterloo, Ontario, I'll keep it close to home. In 2007, a city of 115,000 people working with their utilities, their public service commission, produced 10% of all the companies traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Now, Canada's only got 33 million people, right? They're a lonely country. If you ever met a Canadian, they're friendly because they're lonely, right? No Canadians in here, right? But the elimination of the middle of nowhere means a lot to them. What they've done in a community of 115,000 people is to link up their university sector, their private sector, and their local government. Again, government's part of the market, as I said earlier, to create a very specific strategy to develop new industries. That's where the BlackBerry came from. BlackBerry evolved from 2 guys working in a dormitory in the University of Waterloo. They went out back to a tech park that was made available to them. They kept the intellectual property they developed at the University of Waterloo, unlike Stanford, which takes it from you, and they created a $62 billion Canadian company. That is not an accident. That's a policy. Today, they're working on nanotechnology, as I described. So, middle of nowhere is no more, and we're creating new industries that are moving toward the light. Okay. When I say the middle of nowhere is no more, you probably said, Lou, I knew that 5 years ago. Oh, but it's interesting to look at some of the statistics. Here's one. 35% of the top 100 fastest growing companies are located outside of metro areas, major metro areas. So this idea that we can't connect remote communities is nonsense. Mitchell, South Dakota, 17,000 people out there on the Great Plains, has a 2.8% unemployment rate. 3 gigabit service broadband providers, because they figured out how to get those companies out there or how to create them organically, right? Another statistic. This one will really fascinate you. True. I'm not one of them, by the way. That's me, and that's my wife, but I'm just demonstrating this for the slide. I still have a little uncomfortable with the online marriage thing, but 1 out of every 3 marriages over a 7-year period were done online. So the middle of nowhere is no more. Just, get a look at the rest of the body before you start making that plunge, right? But, next slide, Aaron. Okay. We've talked a lot about technology and smart. You know, everybody's got a a smart proposition now, all these groups. I mean, we've been talking about this since 1995. I think there's a significant difference between smart and what we are, which is the Intelligent Community Forum. It does take a smart community to become an intelligent community. You do have to have the railroad. You do have to have the infrastructure in place. But technology is the piece. Aaron? Go ahead, one more, yeah. Smart technologies make cities work better. Okay, so you do improve your lighting system by adding CPU units to them because you are going to need to collect data to manage cities. Like Mayor Bloomberg said here, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You are going to need intelligent parking system, smart parking systems to manage your flow of traffic. In Kingston, the utilities are working together with the university to create a terrific application where they're gathering data from within the water. They're hydro-powered, right? So they measure very, very small amounts of energy in their water, and they have a system where they pack all this data together and offer consumers discounts on their utility bill because they're saving energy by using less water. And they're able to actually measure this data and extend that information out to their customers. So that's a smart technology. However, let me offer something else here. Intelligent community strategies create better cities in a broadband economy. Now, final slide. So what we're saying now is that you've got the technology, you got the railroad, now what? Now's the hard work. You have to layer something over it, and that is the most profound and endless natural resource we have, which is human intelligence. If we can begin to harness knowledge, culture, all of those things that we thought were the soft parts of our lives into economic expression, as the Koreans do, as the Swedes do, as any innovative culture does, then we will move toward the light. We have certainly evolved as a series of competing tribes, knocking each other's brains out. That's evolved into like economic development, where one city clobbers another. That's a losing proposition. The final thought I'll leave you with is this. Aaron? We have evolved. So we say stop competing with others, start competing with yourselves, forget about the federal government, forget about the state government helping you. They really do really good work, but they move really slow. Seize your own destiny as a community. You can do it. You can become an intelligent community. We have 21 that we name each year. If you go online, you can nominate your own community for our awards program. We get on CNN and all that stuff. Great for your economic development group. But most importantly, continue to do the work that you're doing and think about the fact that we're in a broadband economy, we're on a new railroad, and hopefully we're heading toward the light, unlike the Mets. Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So thank you for this provocative discussion. I am reminded when I taught IP and antitrust law to a class of South Korean judges and lawyers, and I asked them how they were enjoying their time in the Silicon Valley. They said they loved it, but they had two comments. One, the pizza was too salty, and they preferred South Korean pizza. I have not had the pleasure. And they also said the internet was too slow in the Silicon Valley. So we are still in this position, and certainly Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel has been a champion of how fast internet can transform our America and make it more globally competitive. So while Commissioner Rosenworcel sends her regrets, we are very, very fortunate to have here Mr. Travis Littman, who serves as her legal advisor, and he advises her on wireline and consumer issues. He previously served on the Senate Committee on Commerce and Science. He's held various positions at the FCC and has practiced previously communications law. He is a graduate of Lewis and Clark College and the University of Colorado, so represents a number of states here. So, and I really wanted to personally thank Travis for coming. He persevered today with plane details, 2 hours or delays, 2 hours on the tarmac in DC, weather in New York, and still made it here to deliver Commissioner Rosenworcel's remarks and be with us personally to support our work on the Federal-State Joint Conference on Advanced Services. So thank you so much, Travis. Appreciate it. You want to push the button right there? So
there we go. Are we on? All right. Thank you, Commissioner Sandoval. All right. I'm going to thank you for the third time. Thank you, Commissioner Sandoval. You know, Commissioner Rosenworcel does send her sincere regrets that she's unable to be here today. Unfortunately, business has unexpectedly kept her in Washington. On her behalf, I'd like to thank you and Commissioner Sayre for all the work that you've done to put together today's event. And I'd also like to thank you both and the rest of the members of the Joint Conference, state members of the Joint Conference, for the work that you've done to help us all sharpen our thinking about key issues in the communications space. These are issues that affect all Americans, and your dedication to pushing forward the conversation as well as the opportunities presented by broadband does not go unnoticed and is certainly appreciated. Now, Commissioner Rosenworcel was very disappointed that she couldn't be here today, but her loss is my gain because I love coming to New York. Even if it involves sitting on an airport runway for 3 hours in Washington, it's worth it. Now, for some of you, New York might be fun for the food or the sightseeing or the crazy elevator bays that we have here in the hotel, and it is. But let me submit to you that it's also great for a different reason that's germane to today's discussion. New York has some cutting-edge broadband ideas and programs, which we've heard about on today's panel and on some of our other panels. Now, indulge me for a moment, and let's play a mind exercise. Picture in your mind what the future of communications looks like. Got it? Payphones. I'm guessing not many of you thought about a payphone, and admittedly, they don't generally leap to mind. But New York is leading a charge to rethink our public spaces with Wi-Fi and old payphone kiosks. New York libraries are also leading the way with their hotspot loan programs, which Luke described earlier. This is exciting stuff, and I hope that we'll hear more about these and other good ideas with the rest of today's discussion. Now, today's event is entitled Best Practices in Changing Times. This is an apt title because we are at a transformational moment in time. Talk to any millennial and you'll understand why. What most millennials are likely to tell you is that they can't fathom life without the internet. That's because they're a generation of digital natives. They were born into the world of the commercial internet. They've never known anything else. So it's no surprise when you hear stats like over 95% of 18 to 29-year-olds use the internet, while just north of 55% of seniors do. Or that the median number of Facebook friends that millennials have is 250, while the median number that boomers have is only 50. Or that 55% of millennials have shared a selfie at some point compared to just 9% of boomers. Now, my mother is a boomer, and I can tell you, at last Thanksgiving, she did not pull out the selfie stick to take a picture of us all, so these numbers bear out. Just as our demographics and internet usage are changing, our networks and platforms for communication are changing at a rapid clip as well, and we've heard about some of this today. But notwithstanding this change, profound challenges remain. Now, let me tell you about one that was referenced earlier that Commissioner Rosenworcel has been focused on with laser-like precision. Today, as many as 7 in 10 teachers assign homework that requires access to broadband. But FCC data suggests that as many as 1 in 3 households do not subscribe to broadband at any speed. Think about these numbers. And where they overlap is what Commissioner Rosenworcel has termed the homework gap. And the homework gap is real. The Pew Research Center looked into it earlier this year and found that of the 29 million households in the country with school-aged children, about 5 million of those don't have broadband at home. They are falling into the homework gap. Now let me throw a few more stats your way. According to another study done this year by the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and the Family Online Safety Institute, nearly 50% of students say they've been unable to complete a homework assignment because they didn't have access to the internet at home. On top of that, 42% of students say they received a lower grade on an assignment because they didn't have access to the internet or a computer. Now, the homework gap is a product of the fact that education is also in a period of change. The chalk and whiteboards of my youth have given way to one-to-one computing, flipped classrooms, and internet-based math, science, and reading lessons. If you don't have the internet in this environment, getting basic schoolwork done is hard. And while low-income families are adopting smartphones with internet access at high rates, a phone is just not how you want to research a paper, further your education, or apply for a job. Now, we found evidence of the homework gap everywhere we've looked, from Seattle to Kansas City to Detroit to rural Virginia to right here in New York City. Commissioner Rosenworcel often illustrates the homework gap with a couple of examples, so please indulge me. It takes less than an hour to get to Citronelle, Alabama from Mobile. It's a city of 4,000 people. After school, students head to McDonald's. They head to a fast food restaurant because it's one of the only places in town where they can get free Wi-Fi. So students who don't have broadband at home hunker down in booths to do their homework, a side of fries with some Wi-Fi on the side. Now, halfway across the country, Shelly Pezza, a single mother in Foster, Rhode Island, loads up her kids each night after school is done and sports are over for the 20-minute drive to the kids' grandparents' house, over the river and through the woods, quite literally. Now, this daily routine is necessary so that her kids can get online to do their homework because reliable internet access isn't available where Shelly lives. They often don't get back at home until after 10 o'clock at night. These students are the lucky ones. They're determined and have parents that find a way to get them to a relative's house, a fast food restaurant, or a library when it's open. But many kids aren't so lucky. Earlier this year, the Southern Education Foundation published some statistics that should startle anyone. They found that for the first time in our nation's history, more than half of students in public school are from low-income households. Across the board, these households are much less likely to subscribe to broadband. Now, students who lack regular broadband access are struggling to keep up, but their lack of access is holding our entire education system back. And this is so much more than a simple tech or education issue, because if our students can't keep up in school, it has real implications for our economy and our future national competitiveness. So, what can we do? Well, Commissioner Rosenworcel doesn't have a silver bullet. I wish she did. But she does have a few ideas about how we can start to close the homework gap. First, for those of you who've spent the last few days here at NARUC, you've undoubtedly heard how last month the FCC launched a proceeding to modernize our Lifeline program. Now, Lifeline is a worthy program that supports telephone access for low-income Americans. But it's time to modernize it for today's broadband age. Instead of having a program that only supports voice service, we should allow participants to choose between applying that same support to voice or broadband. This simple change could update the program and bring more broadband to homes with school-aged children. Next, Commissioner Rosenworcel thinks we need more Wi-Fi. More than half of us online have used public Wi-Fi at some point. And for many low-income households, it is their only means of getting online. So having more Wi-Fi in more places means more opportunities for students to get their homework done. That's part of the reason, unfortunately, Commissioner Rosenworcel couldn't be here today, as she's working on that Wi-Fi fix. Now, finally, the Commissioner thinks we need to keep tabs on innovative broadband access programs all across the country, talk about them, and copy them. And we've heard a little bit about initiatives in New York. And earlier today, the President announced a Connect at Home initiative, which is going to be they're contemplating private donations and some rule changes within the Housing and Urban Development, Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is all good stuff. And to that end, I have one more story for you. In Coachella, California, and that's the same place where they have the annual summer concert series, the school district superintendent got really innovative because he noticed that students were sitting outside of his office until 6 p.m. each night. Now, they weren't sitting there because they wanted to see him. They were sitting there because it was one of the best places to get the internet. Coachella is a community built on agriculture. More than half of the students are not fluent in English. Many of them are from Spanish-speaking homes, and many of their parents are in fact migrant farm workers. So when the school district launched a program to give every child a tablet for use at school and at home, they realized they had a problem because their students were sitting outside of that superintendent's office. They were falling into the homework gap. So what'd they do? Well, they installed Wi-Fi routers on district school buses. So in this rural area, students often ride an hour just to get to school. So that's an hour to school, an hour back, which is now connected time. With Wi-Fi on board, they can do their homework. Even better, the school system parks the buses next to some of the most remote trailer parks in the district and leaves the routers on so students that are least likely to have broadband at home have yet another way to connect. Now, this idea has already been copied and is popping up elsewhere around the country. We've heard that other school districts in Kentucky and Alabama have taken note, and they're starting to wire up their school buses. This brings me hope. Because as Commissioner Rosenworcel has said, the homework gap is the cruelest part of our digital divide, but it's within our power to bridge it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. And I know that you've played a key role as well in her office in helping to advise her and develop the policies. And thank you again for being here. So turn it back to Commissioner Sayre.
Before we break, let's entertain questions for either the second panel or Mr. Littman. Commissioner Eccles.
You know, I'm from the South. I'm also a Baptist preacher. So I just have to say that kind of like Jesus did with the miracle of the wine at the wedding, we've saved the best for last here. This panel has been remarkable. Let me just say, just outstanding. So, thank you.
Hallelujah.
Especially you, Lou, with your 69 Twitter followers, by the way. But that's okay.
New communities.
Yeah, new communities. That's right.
They're all intelligent.
Okay, well, you also know that in Georgia, we were concerned about the waste, fraud, and abuse surrounding the Lifeline program. We instituted a $5 fee. We had quite a controversial telecom committee about that. But what I like about what I've heard here today from, is it Luke from the library system? Luke, you made a comment that people had to make sure their fine was paid, right, in order to be able to continue with their loan of their hotspot. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
So you required some responsibility, right? So you're not looking for people to pay other people's fines and cover for them. You want them to exercise responsibility, and I really like that aspect of that. And we had quite a controversial conversation about moving Lifeline to broadband, and I'm not going to replay all of that, but I'm quite concerned about both with the current cell phone program, the landline program, and now as we talk about broadband, not requiring people to share in the responsibility. So, Phil, you mentioned the word leverage in your presentation, and about leveraging, I assume you talk about leveraging money, dollars. So, my question to anyone on the panel has to do with this idea of building character and values, which is an old-fashioned concept. I mean, we still talk about it in Georgia. I don't know if you talk about it here in New York. The Broadway show Amazing Grace last night that I attended talked a lot about it. So I highly recommend everyone in the audience to see that. But how can we, if we're going to continue down this road, and if it's as important as you say, how can we make sure that this is really helpful to people as a in building financial literacy or building their character or helping them be more successful in their life? How can we build this infrastructure out without caving to this spirit of entitlement that I feel like is running rampant through many parts of our society?
Start with it. You want to start?
Are you looking at me? Do I have to?
Yeah,
It's
I'm
me?
looking at
All right.
Talk about those seniors.
I'll do it.
Yeah,
I'll take
go
it.
ahead. It's a great question.
It's a great question, and we're in an interesting position on it because we've taught about 25,000 classes now. We've never charged for one. So I worry that I'm creating a culture of dependency out there. But in fact, we're not, because there's a little bit of a distinction here between pure broadband adoption strategies and strategies that involve the transmission of a specific service or device as associated with those projects. So our programs have typically engaged the somewhat difficult to reach older folks who are still on the sidelines of the digital age years after the internet has become created. They've been already on the losing end of the communications revolution where dialogues are going on without them, and they're struggling to engage with everything from the civic discussions around elections to saving money while they're shopping or connecting to their health information or prescription drug plans. And they come to us really, really motivated to learn. And many of them haven't learned yet, partly because they've tried in certain environments and failed. So they may have asked a family member or a neighbor to help them with the technology. But in fact, a lot of these initiatives require the same level of investment of time and commitment that learning a new language would require. And that means that you need a certain level of support that goes on past just a couple of classes or a couple of sessions that are informal, and you really need some structure to it. So we found that by not charging, we take away the barrier for people to engage, and we allow everybody to participate together. So we'll have people of means participating. I mean, you could go to our center today, which is a walking distance from where we are right now, and we'll have people there that are very low income, sometimes homeless. The building has a homeless shelter right upstairs, and we have people from the shelter who come down and take advantage of the courses, and people who show up in town cars and from the Upper East Side, and they'll be in the same class right next to each other with everybody learning at the same clip. And Kimberly Brensteiner, who's here from my center, says technology doesn't discriminate, and it creates an opportunity for people to come together that way. That said, when we give out devices, we're now getting into that business working with the State Economic Development Agency. We're for the first time doing that at scale, where to bring somebody who's, we're up in the North Country, right? So Plattsburgh and Malone and some of these communities are very isolated. People have incomes in the $600 a month range, and for us to ask them to contribute a significant amount of money is a bit of a challenge. But what we are saying is, if we're going to give you a device, we'd like you to donate back some time to the community. So we're asking for a sweat equity model where we're saying, we'll give you the free training and we'll come here and set you up and we'll get you a device, but we'd like you to do 20 hours of engagement with some kind of volunteer initiative, which is very broadly defined, but involves people understanding that it's an exchange of, we all see this as a social problem, a social issue, and we're solving it socially, but we want you to be part of that solution as well. So, we don't see it as a handout as much as we see it as engaging people and solving problems together.
But the National Lifeline Program is not built on that model. You have a different model.
Right. Well, this is one of the wonderful things about running this from a nonprofit perspective is we get to create a distinctive point, a model on this as a pilot and see how it goes. So, as we go to some of the larger policy initiatives in terms of what people are being asked for, there's a kind of open question about how much people should be asked to pay for some of the service if they can't pay anything at all. But our feeling is, we would like to have a model that doesn't create financial barriers if we don't have to have them, or if there's an engagement that is low enough for people that it feels really relatively nominal for very, very poor people. Because for seniors, they've already tried in many cases and failed to engage, and they're feeling like they need to feel like there's a pretty easy path online. We need to be pretty supportive to get over that hurdle.
Yeah, yes, that's right. But you're asking a much broader question. You are putting your minister's hat on, and I appreciate that, because you're asking a deep moral question that has a lot to do with our tribal nature in culture. We regulate ourselves by virtue of the fact of the tribes that we belong to. And what's happened over the last 60 years in the post-industrial age in our cities and our communities is that we've lost our centers. And the United Nations comes out with a report and says 70% of us are going to live in cities by the year 2050. Well, think about what that means. I've been to China. I've been to places. I just spoke with the Chinese, and they said, we're going to move 250 million people out of their villages where they've been for 5,000 years, and we're going to put them in cities simply because we want them to be better consumers. Well, what that does is that completely emasculates the idea of them being cultural beings. And what we say, when I say the middle of nowhere is no more, is that if a human being wants to live in community, which is the greatest source of cultural and spiritual strength and reinforcement, then we need to re-energize those places where they come from, because culture informs them about how to behave, how to take responsibility, how to be entrepreneurial, and how to conduct their lives. We got away from that for primarily economic reasons, which is fine. But we have to restore that through economic means using some of the technologies and the programs that we're talking about today. It's no accident that Pope Francis has 12 million Twitter followers, a few more than me, right? But people are looking for communion. That's where the word community evolves from. The word religion is Latin from legare, which has nothing to do even with religion. It has to do with opportunities that are collective, if you look at the Hebrew of that word. So what we've tried to do at the Intelligent Community Forum, because we've had the luxury to do it, is to try to include a more comprehensive and holistic approach to this discussion where culture is reactivated using the broadband economy and proposition. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a heck of a good question.
Commissioner Clendenin.
Good afternoon. I wanted to I guess, as I've been thinking and listening to this particular panel, sort of the juxtaposition of availability and adoption from a community standpoint. So it seems that most of our discussions are about availability to individuals, whether it's Lifeline or families, and then also how do those families or seniors adopt the technology. In the Virgin Islands, and then I'll talk to rural New York, it seems that we have a problem of community adoption. And so I'll use the example of coming into the Port Authority, going into an airport around the world. We now, as we become dependent, those of us that use the internet on smartphones and devices, are looking for wireless connection when we get off the plane, when we get into a town. And so if we think of upstate New York or the Virgin Islands, as you land, and you're used to your smart device, you need to have navigation. You need to have Yelp. You need to know where to go to the restaurant, how to get basic services. And as we become dependent on those and we go to a community that doesn't have them, there's an adoption problem as a community. So I'm thinking, using Mrs. Swarthout's example, that somehow maybe in upstate New York or in the Virgin Islands, we should give devices to the restaurants and to the owners and space them out in the community so that when people go, not that they have access to the device, but the people that are dependent on those for their livelihoods and their survival and their intelligent community can go to other communities and actually do their work. And I'm thinking in the work that I do in East Africa and people with mobile devices, they can do their work if they can have access to their device. So if you could address that nature of how do we get communities to adopt these strategies so that we can all work together when we go to those communities and don't have the availability of what we're used to.
I'll let you take that first.
I think it's a great point. I mean, we know, so I work across the street from our main central library, which sees millions of visitors every year, sort of divided between tourists, right? People for whom it's a destination, and researchers are coming to dig into the library. And we know one of the primary functions we serve for many of those New Yorkers for those visitors is an access point. And I think we think about our Wi-Fi, so at a very small level, we think about one of the populations we're serving with our free Wi-Fi as exactly what you're talking about. I know there are some cities that are already tackling this. I want to say London has a network that is spread across its businesses on a sort of common login with exactly this purpose, right? Not the English citizens who might have a local connectivity, but the folks who might otherwise be trying to travel or work or orient themselves. And I think it's just a natural evolution of our reliance and dependence. It's a great point.
Cities are putting in cloud-based applications for that. But Tom,
I would just add in there's, what you're referring to, the way I understand the question is that it's the linking together of targeted access opportunities with some of the social or economic outcomes that we're desiring. So, when we look at the upstate New York project that we're doing, we've literally sat down with some of the infrastructure providers up there and looked at the maps of where they're rolling out their partly publicly financed fiber cable systems, and then we are targeting our broadband adoption programming specifically to those communities so that we can get the best results in terms of the public investment to lay the fiber down. Now, that's obviously fiber to the home, but when you look at the institutions, it's a related set of challenges. So, for example, New York City has over 200 senior centers that are federally funded, and when we first started our work at O.A.T.S, the vast majority of those didn't have Wi-Fi access or technology environments where people could come and do collaborative work in the centers that would be digitally based. So O.A.T.S has worked together with a bunch of different, primarily corporate providers, but also the Department of Commerce. We've built out over 30 free computer labs in some of the targeted areas that we can do that. And those community sites now have not just training labs where people can learn, but they've got Wi-Fi where everybody can come in with a tablet or a phone and take advantage of it. In New York City, on any given day, only about 3% of people that are eligible for visiting a senior center take advantage of the senior centers. And so adding Wi-Fi into those systems allows people who are wanting to participate there but might want to be able to bring a notebook or a tablet there to use it.
I'm seeing that as almost like the New York State did on the thruway. So you go to the thruway, you can stop and you have Wi-Fi.
Yep.
So I'm thinking that gas stations throughout the state, when you stop to get gas, you can get online. When you stop at different kinds of those kinds of things, if you go to a park, if you go to any library in New York State, you can pull up and know that you're going through a small town. You go outside the library and you have access. So it's to the police station, fire departments, but a community response that says we need to have availability and adoption by communities that recognize that as we all get online, we need to have access when we go someplace out of our realm. So that was the notion.
I think that's a great idea.
There's also, I'm sorry, there are also a lot of technologies that are beginning to enable that. There's a company actually out here in Long Island called Globecom, which has a hosted service that they provide to smaller carriers, which doesn't require the carrier to do a lot of CapEx. It allows this company, it's basically a satellite company that has its own switch, to host all the applications for an individual or an enterprise, irrespective of where they go. So it's just taking the roaming concept and sort of juicing it up a little bit and bridging these telecom islands. Small cell technology does that as well. I don't know if you've investigated that, but if you go to Columbus, Ohio, I mean, they've got a blanket coverage of the whole city, and they're using small cell technology to cover the gaps. They actually, there's a company called GNX out there, which will come in and map all of your broadband assets, tell you where the gaps are, and then give you the capability to be able to roam wherever you go. So there are a lot of technologies out there that are enabling that, but I think the hosted services proposition is a good one for what you're talking about, and Globecom is one company that we know that does it. For the sake of pure transparency, they're a supporter of our think tank, but they do that, as do others.
Okay, folks, I think it is time for the break. The panel will be available for you to catch them while we get some refreshments, but I'd like everyone to please give a round of applause for this great panel.